Sometimes your heart wants something it can't have, and sometimes life hits you hard when you're not ready. In the wild, tough land of 1870s Wyoming, Magnus Blackwood had been alone for 15 years. This mountain guy was the boss of his area because he earned respect by being strong and surviving. When he met a lively young woman at Devil's Creek, something warmed up in his old, tired heart. Her eyes were like stormy skies, and her spirit was tougher than the hardest rocks. He told her straight up what he wanted, but her answer flipped everything he thought he knew about his past and family. How do you pick between your heart and your family when the wild doesn't care about either? Before we go on, tell us where you're listening from. And if this story grabs you, make sure to follow along because tomorrow I've got something super cool for you. The morning fog stuck to the pine trees like old memories that won't go away, and Magnus Blackwood stood on his cabin porch, watching the sun rise over the sharp peaks of the Wind River Range. At 43, his hands were scarred from tons of cold winters, and his rugged face showed stories of being alone that most guys wouldn't get. The quiet here wasn't empty, it was full of meaning, the kind of calm you get when you know exactly where you fit in the world. Above his stone fireplace hung a plain wooden cross he carved himself during his first rough winter in the mountains. The wood was dark from time and smoke, and sometimes when the fire was low, Magnus would look at it and think about the faith he had as a young guy. That faith got lost somewhere between the battles of Gettysburg and Cold Harbor, buried under too many dead friends and too much pointless fighting. But the cross stayed, reminding him of who he used to be before the war changed everything. It had been 15 years since Magnus first hiked these mountain paths, carrying just a rifle, a few supplies, and a need to vanish from a world that didn't make sense anymore. He was 28 then, with empty eyes and bad memories that followed him like shadows. Other soldiers tried to go back to their old lives and pick up the pieces of normal, but Magnus knew something they didn't. Some guys weren't meant to go back. Some were meant to find a whole new kind of life. The cabin he built himself stood strong against the mountain storms, made from pine logs and sealed with mud and moss. It wasn't big, just 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and a sleeping loft, but it was his. Every log, every stone, every tight joint was a choice to make something solid in a place where he could finally relax. The windows faced east to catch the sunrise and west to see the valley below, giving him a clear view all around. Old war habits were hard to shake. His days had a steady rhythm, like the seasons. Before the sun came up, he'd take care of his horses, 3 tough mountain ponies that could handle the tricky trails better than any war horse he rode. Then he'd check his trap lines, looking at snares and traps for beaver, marten, and fox that gave him food and stuff to trade. The furs brought good cash when old Pete came by each month with supplies from the trading post at South Pass City. Pete Kowalski had been doing those runs for 8 years, ever since he learned the famous Magnus Blackwood, the guy every trapper and outlaw whispered about, was real and not just a frontier story. Pete was Polish, short and stocky, with a gray beard almost to his belt and eyes that sparkled with mischief, making Magnus almost remember how to grin. "You know your problem, Magnus?" Pete said last time, plopping down on a stump by the cabin. "You forgot people are supposed to talk to each other sometimes." "All this mountain air's making you weird," Magnus just huffed, working on a beaver pelt stretched on his tanning frame. "Weird how?" "Weird like you're chatting with that old mare of yours about the weather and deer trails. Horses don't care, buddy. They just want oats." It was true, though Magnus wouldn't say it out loud. The loneliness that once felt like freedom was starting to feel heavy. His talks with his horses got longer and more detailed. He'd caught himself setting out 2 plates for dinner before remembering he was alone. Sometimes he'd wake up at night and listen to the deep quiet, wondering if this was what his whole life would be. The trading post at Devil's Creek was 20 miles down the mountain, where 3 valleys met, and an old Indian trail crossed a new wagon road. It was a stop for travelers crossing the high country, and Magnus went there 4 times a year for stuff he couldn't make or trap, like sugar, flour, coffee, bullets, and sometimes a bottle of whiskey to make long winter nights easier. Sarah McKenna ran the Devil's Creek post with a no-nonsense vibe that reminded Magnus of his mom. Sarah was probably 10 years younger than him and came to Wyoming 5 years ago as a widow with enough money to buy the struggling post and enough grit to make it work. Her husband died in a Colorado mining accident, and she chose running a remote mountain station over going back east to live with relatives who didn't get why she married a guy they thought was beneath her. "You're looking skinny, Magnus," she said last time, eyeing him like someone used to sizing up frontier travelers. "When'd you last eat a real meal? Something not from a trap or a rifle?" "I eat fine," he said, but Sarah was right. His clothes were loose and he'd tightened his belt an extra notch. Food was just fuel now, something to eat quickly before the next job. "There's more to life than just getting by," Sarah said, wrapping his supplies in brown paper. "Even out here in the middle of nowhere, you're supposed to have some fun." But Magnus had convinced himself fun was a luxury he didn't need. Fun led to caring, and caring led to losing people, and he'd lost enough for a lifetime. The mountains taught him he could find peace in simple things, like honest work and surviving day to day without getting tangled up with people. But lately, that peace felt more like emptiness, and the simple life felt like he was hiding from something. He was 43, and what did he have? A strong cabin, a reputation that kept trouble away, and enough savings for old age if he was careful. It was more than most guys had, but it wasn't a life with meaning beyond just existing. The mountains gave him a safe place, but a safe place wasn't a home. A home needed someone to share the good and bad days, someone to notice the little moments that make life worth living. Magnus told himself he didn't need that, but the need was growing stronger every season. His reputation in the territory was a blessing and a curse. The name Magnus Blackwood meant something from Canada to Colorado, said with respect and a bit of caution that opened doors and cleared paths wherever he went. Frontier stories grew bigger with time. Some said he killed 20 guys in fights. Others said he could track a ghost over solid rock or shoot a fly's wings off from 200 yards. The truth was simpler but messier. He'd killed men in the war and twice after when outlaws were dumb enough to test him. He was a great shot and tracker, skills sharpened by need and years of practice alone. But mostly, his reputation came from keeping his word, staying out of others' business, and dealing with threats fast and hard, leaving a mark on anyone who saw it. Other trappers respected him because he didn't cheat, didn't steal land, and followed the unwritten rules that let tough guys live together in the wild. Outlaws feared him because he made it clear his mountain was neutral. No running, no hiding, no settling scores. Anyone who brought trouble answered to him. But respect and fear weren't friendship, and Magnus was starting to see the difference. Pete and Sarah were the closest he had to real friends, but even those ties were careful, built on trading furs for supplies and small talk. It was fair, but it wasn't like having someone who knew what you were thinking before you said it, someone who cared if you made it home safe. The wooden cross above his fireplace glowed in the morning light, and Magnus remembered his mom's hands teaching him to carve little figures from pine scraps. She was patient with his clumsy kid tries, praising every wonky shape like it was art. "The wood wants to be something beautiful," she'd say. "Your job is to help it find its real shape." Maybe that was his issue. He'd spent 15 years carving away anything that made him open to hurt, anything tied to messy human feelings. What was left was strong and useful, like his cabin, but it wasn't beautiful. It wasn't the life he was meant to have. The sun rose higher, burning off the fog and showing the valley below his cabin like a green blanket with silver streams. Somewhere down there, beyond his lonely world, life went on with all its risks and chances. For the first time in years, Magnus wondered what he was missing by staying high above it all, watching instead of joining the messy, risky, needed business of being fully human. The October air had a winter bite when Magnus made his quarterly trip to Devil's Creek. His pack horse carried prime beaver pelts and fox furs that would sell well before trading season ended. The trail from his cabin wound through aspen trees with leaves like old gold, making a natural church that always stirred something deep in him. Even after 15 years, this land's beauty could surprise him. He smelled smoke before he saw the trading post, and it felt wrong. Too much smoke. Too dark, with a sharp smell of burnt wool and leather. Magnus pushed his horse faster, his hand checking his rifle. In this land, odd smoke usually meant trouble. When he rounded the last bend, he saw the problem. A wagon was tilted by the main building, its canvas cover half burned, with blackened wood scattered around. 3 horses grazed nearby, sweaty and with gear pulled off fast. Someone was in a rush. "Sarah," McKenna came out of the trading post as Magnus rode up, her neat hair tied back tight and her apron stained with what looked like blood. She waved but looked serious. "Magnus, thank goodness you're here," she called. "We've got hurt people inside, and I need another calm pair of hands." He tied his horses and followed her, noticing how her eyes kept flicking back to the building. In 5 years, he'd never seen her shaken. Whatever happened was bad. "What's going on?" he asked, heading to the door. "A wagon train got attacked by bandits 10 miles south," she said. 3 families headed to Oregon. The men fought them off but got hurt. They dragged themselves here 2 hours ago. Inside, the trading post was messy but organized. Blankets were spread on the floor and injured people lay on them. A man with a bloody shoulder bandage leaned against the wall while an older woman helped a younger guy with a broken leg. Kids huddled in a corner, scared and quiet. But Magnus's eyes locked on a young woman kneeling by a hurt boy, cleaning a deep cut on his forehead while talking to him softly. Her dark hair was tied in a simple bun, and her plain brown dress was worn but clean. Something about her filled the room. "Elena, we need more clean cloth," Sarah called. The woman looked up, and Magnus felt his heart skip, like a door opening after being locked for years. Her eyes were gray-blue like storm clouds, full of smarts and kindness. When their eyes met across the crowded room, he saw she recognized something in him. Not his face, but something deeper. She really saw him, in a way no one had in forever. "There's more bandages in my saddlebags," Elena said, her voice with a slight accent. Maybe Irish or something older. "But first, let me finish with young Thomas here." She went back to the boy, and Magnus watched her careful, gentle moves. She'd done this before, not just basic first aid, but real doctor stuff. Her hands were steady, and the hurt people relaxed under her touch. "She showed up 3 days ago," Sarah whispered to him. "Said she was traveling alone, looking for family. Paid for a room and meals, said she'd work to earn her keep. Good thing, too. I couldn't handle this without her." Magnus watched Elena move from the boy to a woman, checking a bandaged arm like a pro. When she stood to grab supplies, he saw a green ribbon in her hair, a little fancy touch that stood out against her practical vibe. "Miss Elena," he said, stepping forward, "I'm Magnus Blackwood. Sarah says you're helping the hurt folks. Need anything I can get?" She looked at him again, and he saw a flicker, maybe surprise or knowing his name. His reputation reached even strangers. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, nodding. "I've heard good things about you. We need hot water, clean cloth, and maybe some whiskey for pain. That man took a bullet in his shoulder, and it's still stuck in there." Her voice was educated, like she'd been to a good school. What was a woman like her doing alone in Wyoming's wild? For 2 hours, Magnus worked with Elena to help the hurt travelers. She led with quiet confidence, and he followed her orders without question. Her calm in the face of pain earned respect. By afternoon, the worst injured were stable. The kids were fed and resting, and the room's tension eased into tired relief. Elena checked bandages one last time, comforting people, while Magnus helped Sarah set up beds for the families. Near sunset, he found himself alone with Elena on the trading post porch. She stood at the railing, looking at the mountains, glowing in the evening light like something magical. The green ribbon in her hair shone like a bright flame. "You're trained in medicine," Magnus said, joining her. It wasn't a question. "I grew up in a convent," Elena said, not looking at him. "The Sisters of Mercy in St. Louis taught me to care for sick and hurt people. It's useful out here. What brings you to Wyoming? It's tough for a woman alone." She turned to him, her face guarded. "I'm looking for family. My parents died when I was little, and the church raised me. I recently heard I might have relatives here, maybe a brother, but I don't remember him clearly." Her words hit Magnus strangely, like they echoed something inside him. "This is dangerous land for searching," he said. "Bandits, bad weather, wild animals. A woman needs protection." Elena's chin lifted, showing strength under her soft look. "I've done okay so far, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not some weak city girl who falls apart at trouble." "I can see that," Magnus said, smiling. A real smile that felt rusty. "But getting by and really living are different. Your skills could help a town. Why risk the wild for family you might not find?" "Because family's what matters most," Elena said simply. "Comfort, safety, security. What's it worth without people who know the real you? Without belonging?" Her words hit Magnus hard like a punch. Here was this amazing woman risking everything for connection, while he'd run from it to avoid pain. They stood quietly as the last light faded from the peaks. Magnus studied her face, noting her strong jaw and eyes that caught the stars. She was beautiful, but it was more. Her warmth made people feel safe and understood. In that moment, watching her in the starlight, Magnus made a choice that would change their lives. "Miss Elena," he said, his voice rough, "you're looking for family, for belonging. I get that more than you know." She looked at him curious. "I've lived alone in these mountains for 15 years, he went on. Built a life alone because I thought it was safer than caring about people who could be lost. But lately, I see safety and emptiness aren't the same." Elena waited, sensing more. Magnus took a deep breath, knowing he was crossing a big line. "I have an idea. Come to my mountain. Share my cabin, my life. Help me remember what it's like to care for someone. In return, I'll give you the belonging you want. You'll have my sons help me build something lasting here." The words came out blunt, not as smooth as he'd hoped, but honest, from a heart empty too long. Elena stared, her face going from shock to something like horror. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Mr. Blackwood, She stopped, hand at her throat like the words choked her. "I can't say yes." "Why?" Magnus asked, starting to think he'd misread everything. Maybe the connection was all in his head. Maybe she just saw him as another rough mountain guy. Her next words broke his world. "Because I'm your sister." The stars spun above, and a night bird called across the valley. But Magnus heard only her impossible words, and his heart breaking for reasons he couldn't grasp. The words hung in the cool fall air, impossible to take back or ignore. Magnus stared at Elena, searching her face for a mistake, a joke, anything. But her gray-blue eyes held only truth and deep sadness that squeezed his heart. "That's impossible," he said, voice shaking. "I'd remember a sister." Elena's hand shook as she pulled a faded photograph from a pouch at her waist. "I don't carry much, Mr. Blackwood, but I have this. Sister Catherine gave it to me before I left the convent. It was with me when I was brought to them as a kid." Magnus took the photo with unsteady hands. In the dim light from the trading post windows, he saw a frontier family, man and woman behind two kids. The man looked like a younger, softer Magnus. The woman had dark hair and kind eyes. A little girl sat in her lap looking like Elena, but the boy beside the man, maybe 8 or 9, with serious eyes and Magnus's jawline, made his breath catch. The boy's hand rested on the girl's shoulder. "Mother of God," Magnus whispered, sinking into a porch chair as his legs gave out. "How?" "I remember bits," Elena said, sitting beside him. "Flashes in dreams, a big brother carrying me on his shoulders, a cabin smelling of pine and mom's bread. Then nothing, just the convent, the sisters saying my family died in a fever when I was 3. Magnus closed his eyes, digging for memories buried deep. There was a sister, a tiny girl with dark curls who followed him everywhere, crying when he left to hunt with their dad. "Mary," he said suddenly, the name bubbling up. "Your name was Mary." Elena gasped, confirming it. "The sisters called me Elena to start fresh. Leave the sadness behind." "But you're not dead," Magnus said, struggling with the impossible truth. "You're here." "How didn't I know?" "Why didn't I look for you?" "Because you were told I was dead, like I was told you were," Elena said, her voice heavy with years of wondering. "Someone wanted us to think we were alone." "Why?" Magnus stood pacing the porch, mind racing. "The fever outbreak, I was 10. Mom and Dad got sick, then others in our settlement. I was sent to our uncle in Colorado to stay safe. I was sent to the convent for the same reason," Elena said. "But why weren't we brought back together after?" "Uncle Joshua," Magnus said darkly. "Dad's brother. They fought over business, money, land. Joshua always said Dad owed him. They argued every time they met." Elena's eyes widened. "He split us up on purpose. Told you I was dead so you wouldn't look. Told the convent our family was gone so they wouldn't try to find you." "Why?" "Inheritance," Magnus said bitterly. "Our parents had good land, saved money. If Joshua made everyone think we were dead, he could take it all as the last family member. One living kid could have fought him in court, but not if they didn't know they had a claim. The truth of their uncle's betrayal settled like a cold wind. 2 kids' lives were cut apart, their connection destroyed for greed. Magnus felt the old rage from his war days. 35 years, Elena said quietly. 35 years thinking I was alone, that everyone who loved me was gone." Magnus stopped pacing and really looked at her, seeing their mom's eyes and their dad's stubborn jaw. "I dreamed of you sometimes," he admitted, sitting again. "A little girl with curls who laughed when I made faces. I thought it was just kid stuff, mixed up memories. I dreamed of a big brother, Elena said. Someone strong who made me feel safe. Those dreams pushed me west, like part of me knew someone out there was mine. They sat quietly, soaking in the huge truth. The hurt travelers inside were settled for the night, and Sarah had gone to her room, leaving Magnus and Elena alone with their discovery. What now? Elena asked. We found each other, but it makes everything tricky. Magnus knew what she meant. The spark he'd felt, the reason he asked her to share his life, didn't vanish when he learned she was his sister. If anything, it grew stronger with their shared past. But those feelings, which could have been okay between strangers, were now wrong because they were family. I don't know, he said honestly. I spent 15 years saying I didn't need family, didn't want the mess of caring. Now the one person who makes me feel alive is the one I can't be with like that. Elena's laugh was soft and sad. Maybe that's the meanest trick of all. We find family when it becomes a wall to what our hearts want. What do our hearts want? Magnus asked, scared of the answer. Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with stars. The same as yours, I think. Connection, understanding, someone to share life's heavy load in a world that feels too big and empty. Those are risky feelings for siblings, Magnus said carefully. Yes, Elena agreed. They are. The truth hung like a bridge they couldn't cross. They were brother and sister, reunited after years apart. It should have been pure joy, but it felt like a new kind of pain. I should go, Elena said finally. Keep looking for other family or go back to the convent. Staying here will only get messier. No, Magnus said sharply. You've been searching for family your whole life. You found me. We can't be what I first thought, but we're still brother and sister. That's something. What are you saying? Elena asked. Come to my mountain not as my wife, but as my sister. Help me learn what family means again. Let me make up for 35 years of thinking you were gone. Elena thought for a long time. It'll be hard, she said. Living so close, sharing a home when we both feel what we feel. We're grown-ups, Magnus said, not fully believing it. We can control what we do, even if we can't control how we feel. And if we can't? Elena asked. Magnus had no answer. The smart thing would be to part ways now, before things got impossible. Elena could keep searching or start fresh somewhere else. He could go back to his lonely mountain knowing his sister was alive, even if out of reach. But losing her so soon after finding her felt unbearable. 35 years of emptiness had been filled by her, and he couldn't face going back to that. We'll deal with that if it happens, he said. For now, isn't it enough that we're not alone anymore? Elena studied him in the starlight, weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll come to your mountain. We'll try to be the family we should have been. The feelings, the spark, we'll ignore them. She said it with more confidence than Magnus felt. We're brother and sister. That's what counts. The rest is just confusion from being apart too long. Magnus wanted to believe her, but he saw doubt in her eyes. The connection wasn't fake. It was real and strong, and knowing they were siblings wouldn't make it go away. But they had to try, for their parents' memory, for the kids they used to be, for the family bond that should have protected them from this mess. We'll leave in the morning, Magnus said. I'll talk to Sarah about supplies. Elena nodded and went inside. As she passed, she touched his shoulder briefly, a sisterly gesture that felt like more. Magnus, she said softly, whatever happens, I'm glad we found each other. Even if it's all impossible, I'm not alone anymore. After she left, Magnus stayed on the porch, staring at the stars, trying to figure out how his life got so tangled in one evening. He woke that morning as a lone mountain man, worried only about trading furs before winter. Now he was a brother to a woman he'd wanted as a wife, tied by blood to someone who stirred feelings he never expected. The mountains looked different now in the starlight, less like a hideout and more like a place where two people might figure out the trickiest relationship of their lives, away from the world's judgment. Whether that was good or bad, he'd find out. Dawn came too soon and not soon enough. Magnus spent the night on the porch, wrapped in his bedroll, staring at the stars, his mind spinning with memories reshaped by Elena's news. Every childhood memory now felt heavier, as he tried to piece together a life broken on purpose. Inside, Elena helped Sarah with the hurt travelers all night. When Magnus entered at sunrise, he found her by the boy with the head injury, changing his bandages with the same gentle skill she'd shown before. Seeing her care stirred something in his chest. both natural and wrong. "The boy's fever broke last night," she said, sensing him without looking up. "He'll be okay, but he'll have a scar to remember this day." Magnus nodded, seeing how the travelers looked to Elena for comfort. In less than a day, she'd become their anchor, giving hope and healing. It was a gift, making people feel safe, and he wondered how many lives she'd touched at the convent. Sarah came from the kitchen with coffee and biscuits, eyeing the careful space Magnus kept from Elena. "You two seem different today," she said. "Everything okay?" "We found out we're related," Elena said simply, not explaining more. "Magnus asked me to stay at his cabin while I look for other family." It wasn't a lie, but not the full truth. Sarah's eyebrows went up, but she didn't push. In the frontier, people's business was their own unless they shared it. "Well, that's something to celebrate," Sarah said, setting down the coffee pot. "Finding family out here is a big deal, though you both look like you've seen a ghost. Happy reunions don't usually look so heavy." Magnus took a coffee cup and moved to the window, needing space from Elena to think. Outside, his horses snorted, ready to go home. Soon, he'd lead his new sister up the trails he'd walked alone for 15 years, into the safe place he'd built to escape people. The irony wasn't lost on him. "There's something I need to show you," Elena said quietly, joining him at the window. "Before we leave, before we try to be a family." She pulled a folded paper from her bag, its edges yellowed. "Sister Catherine gave me this with the photo. She said it might matter someday, but didn't know why." Magnus opened it and saw an official certificate from the Colorado government, a military discharge for his dad, dated months before the fever outbreak. It showed his dad fought in the territorial militia, keeping peace on the frontier. But a note at the bottom, in faded ink, caught his eye. "Recipient recommended for land grant, Section 4, Township 12, Wind River Valley. Grant approved pending settlement requirements." "Our dad got land," Elena said, watching him. "The same place where your cabin is, unless I'm wrong about the borders." Magnus stared at the paper, mind spinning. "I didn't know. Uncle Joshua never mentioned a land grant when he sent me to Colorado. I thought our parents lost everything when they died." "Maybe they did," Elena said carefully, "but not to the fever. Maybe to family who saw a chance in tragedy." The truth hit Magnus hard. Not only had Joshua split them up and stolen their inheritance, but Magnus had built his cabin on land that was rightfully his, without knowing it. His safe place was his birthright, claimed through years of hard work. 35 years, he said darkly. Joshua let me think I was starting from nothing, building my own life, when I was just taking back what was ours. Elena's hand moved to comfort him, then stopped, hanging in the air. These moments of almost touching would be the hardest part of their new life. "We can't change the past," she said. "But maybe we can build something better from what's left." The travelers started waking, getting ready to move on to Oregon. Magnus helped load supplies and check wagon repairs, while Elena made sure their medical needs were set. The work kept them focused, away from the messy feelings between them. By mid-morning, they headed to Magnus's mountain, their horses climbing the steep trail through pines and aspens. Elena rode well, Magnus noticed, like she'd learned as a kid before the convent. Another piece of their shared past, shone in small ways. They rode quietly for the first hour, each lost in thought as they climbed. The fall air was crisp, smelling of pine and hinting at snow. Elena took a deep breath, and Magnus saw her relax as they left the trading post behind. "I forgot how pretty the wild can be," she said. "The convent had gardens, but nothing like this, so free." "Do you remember being here as a kid?" Magnus asked. "These mountains?" Elena thought for a moment. "I remember pine smells and water over rocks. In dreams, I'd hear that sound and feel safe, but I didn't know why." Magnus pointed to a far-off ridge. "There's a creek by my cabin, clear water that always sings, winter or summer." "Maybe that's what you remember." "Maybe," Elena said, her voice soft with longing. "It'd be nice to think part of me knew I belonged here." They stopped at noon to rest the horses and eat the meal Sarah packed. Sitting by a stream, Magnus watched Elena watch the water. Her face in the light looked even more like their mom's. Same delicate bones, same thoughtful look. "Tell me about the convent," he said. "What was it like?" Elena smiled, the first time it reached her eyes since her big news. "It was peaceful mostly. The Sisters of Mercy taught us to read, write, care for the sick, and manage a house. Sister Catherine taught me music, piano and singing, though I haven't done much of that lately." "They didn't want you to become a nun?" "They tried," Elena said. But I always felt something was missing, something waiting outside those walls. Now I know it was family. Magnus felt that dangerous warmth her words always sparked. What now that you found me? Her face grew serious. I don't know. I thought finding family would give answers, a purpose. Instead, it's brought questions I never expected. Like what? Elena looked at him, and he saw the same risky awareness in her eyes that he felt. Questions about what we want versus what we should want. About whether some love is worth the price it demands. Her words were a challenge, and Magnus knew they'd hit a moment that would shape their relationship. They could admit the spark between them or pretend it was just confusion from being apart so long. Elena, he said carefully, what we're feeling is kind of natural. We met as strangers and felt something. Being related doesn't erase that, but it should change how we act. We're brother and sister, Magnus, Elena said firmly. That means we protect each other, even from our own feelings. He nodded, though part of him fought the logic. You're right. It's just hard to split what I felt before I knew from what I should feel now. Time will help, Elena said, sounding like she was convincing herself too. Being around each other will make us feel like siblings, not focused on what we can't have. Magnus hoped she was right, but he had doubts. His cabin was small, built for one. Sharing it with Elena would test every bit of control he'd built over years alone. They reached the cabin as the afternoon sun glowed through the pines. Elena stopped her horse by the clearing, looking at the log walls, stone chimney with a thin smoke trail, and the small garden where Magnus grew vegetables and herbs. It's perfect, she said softly. Like a place to find peace. I hope you're comfortable here, Magnus said, helping her off her horse. His hands on her waist sent a spark through them both, a reminder that their family bond didn't stop the physical pull. Elena stepped back fast, putting space between them. I'll try not to mess up your routine. I know you're used to being alone. You won't mess anything up, Magnus said, not sure he believed it. Your family. That's what this place needed. Someone to share it with. As they moved Elena's few things into the cabin, Magnus wondered if he'd made a mistake. The spark between them grew stronger in the small space, every accidental touch or glance carrying danger. But when Elena looked at the wooden cross above the fireplace and smiled, he knew having her here was right, even if they had to keep careful boundaries. Tomorrow I'll show you the land, he said, stoking the fire for the night. The creek, hunting trails, what's ours? Ours, Elena repeated, liking the sound. I've never had a place that was mine. Magnus sat by the fire, watching her arrange her things carefully, like someone who valued what little she had. The green ribbon from her hair sat by her Bible, and that small feminine touch made the cabin feel more like a home than ever. Outside, the mountain night settled in, wind in the pines, an owl's call, the horses moving in their corral. But inside, the quiet felt different with Elena there. Less empty, more waiting. As she got ready for bed in the small alcove that was her room, Magnus listened to her soft sounds. Rustling fabric, water splashing, floorboards creaking. These were sounds of a shared life, stirring feelings he thought he'd buried. Magnus? Elena's voice came softly from behind her curtain. Yes? Thank you for bringing me here, for sharing your home. I know it's not easy, but I'm glad we found each other. So am I, Magnus said, meaning it despite the mess. Sleep well, sister. The word felt odd, like learning a new language. But it was the safe word, the one that might help them navigate their dangerous feelings. In the dark, Magnus lay awake, listening to Elena's quiet breathing, hoping time would ease the tension. But deep down, he knew living with his sister would be his toughest challenge yet. The first weeks with Elena in the cabin were like a careful dance, both of them hyper-aware of every look and word. Magnus noticed every moment their hands might brush over coffee or while cooking. Elena seemed just as careful, their talks polite like strangers, not siblings reconnecting. But in quiet moments when she thought he wasn't watching, Magnus saw the real Elena, standing at the window each morning, staring at the peaks with a longing that hurt his heart. He saw her touch the wooden cross when she thought he wasn't looking, her fingers tracing the wood he'd carved that first winter. The mountain life adjusted to two people. Elena took over cooking, turning Magnus's plain meals into real food. She had a knack for making simple stuff, venison, wild veggies, preserved fruit, taste amazing. The cabin smelled of fresh bread, herby stews, and sweet apple preserves from a hidden valley nearby. "You're spoiling me," Magnus said one evening, watching her finish a venison roast that smelled better than anything he'd eaten in 15 years. "Nonsense," Elena said, not looking up. "A guy needs good food to handle mountain life. You've been treating food like gas, not nourishment. And you've been treating me like one of your convent patients," Magnus said, no blame in his voice. "Someone to take care of?" Elena paused, and when she looked at him, he saw something open in her face. "Maybe it's an old habit from the sisters. They taught us caring for others is like praying. Is that what this is? Prayer?" "I don't know," Elena said softly. "I just know looking after you feels right, like it's what I'm supposed to do." Her words hung heavy, full of meaning they didn't dare explore. Magnus cleared his throat and focused on other tasks, but her words echoed in his mind long after dinner. In the third week of November, Magnus learned how musical Elena was. He came back from checking traps to find her humming while mending his shirt. The tune was beautiful, mixing church hymns with frontier songs, and her voice made the cabin feel bigger, like it was breathing with her song. "Don't stop," Magnus said when she noticed him and went quiet. "Please, it's been years since I heard music here." Elena blushed but kept humming, and Magnus sat by the fire to listen. The music unlocked something in him, a space for beauty he'd closed off years ago. "Sister Catherine taught me that song," Elena said when it ended. "It's called The Water is Wide, about lovers kept apart by things they can't control." "Fits us, doesn't it?" Magnus said, feeling the risky ground. "Are we lovers kept apart or family learning to accept what we can't change?" Elena asked, meeting his eyes. Her question cut to the heart of their growing confusion. Magnus told himself they were siblings first, but his feelings for Elena weren't brotherly. They were a man's for a woman, strong and wrong because of their blood. "I wish I knew," he said honestly. "I wish I could separate what I felt before I knew who you were from what I'm supposed to feel now." Elena set down her mending and looked out at the snowy peaks. "Sometimes I dream of a different life, where we met as strangers and could follow our feelings. Do you dream like that?" Magnus's throat tightened. "Every night. Then I wake up, remember who we are, and feel bad for wanting what can't be." Her honesty broke something in him. He stood and joined her at the window, keeping space between them. "Elena, maybe what we feel isn't totally wrong. We were raised apart, without the normal sibling barriers. Are you saying that makes it okay?" Elena asked, her voice more hopeful than judging. "I'm saying we shouldn't beat ourselves up for feelings that made sense when we met. But we can't act on them either." Elena turned to him, tears in her eyes. "I'm tired of being careful all the time, watching every word, every move. At the convent, I lived with constant control. I thought finding family would let me be myself. Now I've found you, and I have to hold back even more, because I can't be what I want to be to you." Her pain nearly broke his control. He reached to comfort her, then stopped, his hand frozen. Even that small touch felt dangerous. "Elena," he said softly, "whatever we are, having you here has made me happier than I've been since I was a kid. You've brought life to this place, to me. Even if we can't have what our hearts want, what we have is special." Elena wiped her eyes and looked at him, something settling in her face. "Maybe that's enough. Maybe loving what we can have instead of wanting what we can't is a better kind of love. Do you believe that?" "I'm trying," Elena said, "for both of us." That night, Magnus lay awake, the winter wind howling outside, thinking about their talk. Elena was right. They had to value what they had, not long for what they couldn't. But knowing that and feeling it were different. Her restless movements in her room told him she was struggling too. He heard her pace and once soft crying. Every part of him wanted to comfort her, but he stayed still. Even innocent comfort could lead to lines they couldn't cross. Near dawn, he fell into uneasy sleep, dreaming of Elena, not as his sister, but as the woman he met at Devil's Creek, free to love. He woke knowing his mind wasn't helping his efforts to stay proper. Over breakfast, Elena seemed determined, like she'd made a choice in the night. "Magnus, about last night, I think you're right. We need to value what we have." "Glad you think so," Magnus said, sensing more. "But we also need to be practical. We're living close, sharing daily life, and our feelings won't just vanish because we want them to." Magnus set down his coffee. "What do you mean?" "We need rules," Elena said. "Clear lines to keep us acting right even when our hearts pull us elsewhere. No touching unless we have to. No talking about our feelings alone. No sharing space when we can avoid it. Separate sleeping, bathing, dressing areas. The rules felt necessary but painful. Magnus saw the sense, but living so distant from Elena in their small cabin seemed like torture. "And if the rules don't work?" he asked. "If we can't keep those lines," Elena said, her face pained but voice steady, "then one of us leaves. For both our sakes and the family we're trying to keep." Magnus nodded, seeing her wisdom though his heart fought it. "Okay, we'll try your rules. I hope it doesn't come to leaving." "So do I," Elena said softly. "Because even with all this mess, I've never felt more at home than here with you." Snow started falling outside, signaling a long, tough winter. As Magnus watched the snow pile up, he wondered if Elena's rules would hold them through the months of being stuck together, or if the closeness and restraint would break them. The green ribbon by her Bible still stirred feelings no rules could stop. He knew their toughest tests were coming. December brought blizzards that lasted days. With cold so bad, even grabbing firewood was hard. The cabin became their whole world, cut off by snow and howling wind. Magnus had survived many winters alone, but sharing the small space with Elena tested every rule they'd set, bringing new tensions. The rules worked okay during the day, when tasks kept them apart. But the long evenings by the fireplace with only storm sounds outside pushed their self-control to the limit. Elena started reading aloud at night, her voice filling the quiet with safe stories, poetry, essays, religious thoughts from her convent books. But even listening to her voice felt risky. Magnus watched her lips move, the firelight on her face, her graceful hands turning pages. "You're not listening," Elena said one night, closing her poetry book. "Your mind's somewhere else." Magnus blinked, caught staring at her hands, remembering how they'd helped the wounded. "I was listening," he lied. "What's the last line I read?" He had no answer, and Elena looked worried. "This isn't working, is it? The rules aren't fixing things. They're just making us miserable differently." Magnus went to the window, staring at the swirling snow trapping them. "What do we do? The storm won't stop for days, and there's nowhere to go. We're stuck here till spring." "I know," Elena said, standing by the fireplace, the distance between them feeling too big and too small. "But we can't keep living like this, together but not really sharing. Pretending we don't feel what we do, acting like strangers, not family. The other option is admitting feelings we can't act on," Magnus said. "How's that better?" Elena stared into the fire like it held answers. "Maybe it's better because it's honest. Pretending we don't care is hurting us more." Magnus turned to look at her in the firelight. "Elena, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to accept what we are. Brother and sister, yes, but also a man and woman who met by chance and felt something bigger than reason or rules." Her words were dangerous, like the fire's smoke. Magnus felt his control cracking. "That's a risky road," he said quietly. "Is it riskier than this?" "This polite distance, this constant holding back, it's killing something in us. I see it in your eyes, Magnus, the same emptiness growing in me." Magnus closed his eyes, knowing she was right but scared of where honesty might lead. "What do you want from me, Elena?" She stepped closer, just outside their invisible line. "I want you to look at me like you did at Devil's Creek. Talk to me like I'm someone you care about, not someone you're scared to care about. Be honest about what's between us, even if we can't act on it. And then what? We admit these feelings and suffer with them, living as siblings but wanting more? Maybe," Elena said, "maybe loving someone you can't have is better than not loving at all." Magnus stared at her, seeing pain and hope in her eyes. His mind screamed this was a mistake, but his heart knew she was right. "Elena," he said softly, "if we cross this line, we can't go back. We can't unknow what we feel or unsay these words." "I know," she whispered, "but I'm tired of pretending the realest thing in my life isn't there." The storm outside roared louder, rattling the windows, emphasizing their aloneness. Magnus stepped closer to Elena, close enough to touch. He saw her pulse racing, smelled the faint lavender in her hair. "Say it," Elena whispered. "Say what we both know but haven't dared." Magnus touched her cheek, feeling her soft skin under his rough fingers. "I love you," he said, voice rough with feeling. "Not like a brother loves a sister, but like a man loves a woman, completely, impossibly against every rule." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she looked relieved. "And I love you the same." I have since Devil's Creek before I knew you were my brother. Knowing hasn't changed it, just made it hurt more. They stood in the firelight, hands almost touching, sharing the same air, admitting what they'd feared to name. The truth was beautiful and terrible. Now what? Magnus asked, voice soft over the storm. Now we love each other honestly, Elena said. We stop hiding. Stop acting like our feelings are shameful. We love as siblings and as a man and woman, and we find a way to live with both. And if it's too much? Elena's smile was sad but firm. Then at least we were honest about who we are. At least we had this. Magnus let his hand drop but didn't step back. The space between them buzzed with possibility and impossibility. There'll be talk, he said. If anyone finds out how we feel, they'll judge us hard. Let them talk, Elena said. The only ones who matter are in this cabin. Then Magnus noticed a paper that fell from Elena's book. He picked it up, seeing official writing. What's this? Elena's face grew worried. It came with Pete's last supply run before the storms. I didn't know how to tell you. Magnus read it, heart sinking. It was from Marshal Tom Hendricks in South Pass City, asking about Elena's whereabouts and her relationship with Magnus. Someone had complained to the authorities, saying their situation might not be proper or legal. Who sent this? Magnus asked, suspecting the answer. Father Miguel arrived in South Pass City 2 weeks ago, Elena said. He's been asking about me, where I went after Devil's Creek. Sarah might have mentioned I went to your mountain. Magnus felt cold anger. The priest who raised you? He's a good man, Magnus, but he's strict about how unmarried women should act. If he thinks I'm living wrong, are we? Magnus asked bluntly. Elena met his eyes. Not in Father Miguel's way, but in our hearts, maybe. We're living like a married couple in every way, but the closest, sharing life, caring for each other. Her words hit hard. They'd been acting like husband and wife, just keeping physical distance and knowing they were siblings. The marshal will come, Magnus said grimly. When spring makes travel possible, he'll ride up to check the complaints. And when he sees us living together, he'll assume the worst. And in his mind, we'll be guilty whether we've done anything or not, Elena finished. Magnus looked out at the storm, their shield and prison. You should leave, he said. As soon as you can, go back to the convent or find somewhere else. My reputation is my choice, Elena said firmly. I won't let narrow-minded people chase me away who don't get that love can be complicated. Elena, you don't get it. Out here, a woman's reputation is everything. Without it, you'll have no chances, no future. Elena stood close, her warmth strong. What chances did I have before? What future except the convent or marrying some guy who only saw my lack of money? Magnus had no answer. Her options were limited before she found him. Here I have something new, Elena said. A home. Someone who values me for me, who loves me fully, even if we can't show it normally. And when the marshal comes, when neighbors talk, when Father Miguel demands you go back to a proper life, Elena faced him fully, her eyes like steel. We'll face it together, as family, as partners, as whatever we need to be to protect what we've got. Magnus felt fear loosen in his chest. She was right. They'd built something worth fighting for. It won't be easy, he warned. Living under suspicion, every move judged. Nothing good is easy, Elena said. We found each other against all odds, created love from loneliness, family from nothing. We can find strength to protect it. Outside, the storm calmed, the wind softening. But inside, Magnus felt a new storm brewing, the kind that tests bonds, not just survival. Okay, he said. We'll face it together. But when the marshal comes, we tell the truth. We're brother and sister, living as family. What we feel beyond that is our business. Elena smiled, her eyes bright. The truth, in all its messy, beautiful ways. As they settled for another night of careful distance and admitted love, Magnus thought of the green ribbon that caught his eye at Devil's Creek. It sat by Elena's Bible, a sign of the femininity she brought to his world. Tomorrow he'd ask about it. Tonight it was enough they'd stopped lying to themselves about their bond. Whatever came next, they'd face it honestly, as two people who loved each other in ways that broke every rule. Spring came late, not really starting until mid-April, and with it came Father Miguel Sanchez, riding a tired horse up the trail. Elena saw him first, a black dot against the green valley, and her sharp breath brought Magnus to the window. He's here, she said, voice steady despite her tense shoulders. Magnus watched the man in his 60s, stocky but strong in the saddle, dressed in plain black priest clothes. Even far off, his determination was clear, like someone sure of his moral power. "What will you tell him?" Magnus asked. "The truth," Elena said, "as much as he needs to hear." Father Miguel dismounted, studying the cabin, Elena's garden, and the homey touches showing a man and woman lived there. His face was neutral, but his eyes judged. "Elena Maria Santos," he said, his voice with a slight Mexican accent. "You've led me on a chase, child." "Father Miguel," Elena said respectfully, "I didn't expect you here, nor did I expect to find you living in sin with a man of questionable reputation," he said bluntly, looking at Magnus. "You must be Magnus Blackwood. Your name's known with fear and respect." Magnus offered his hand. "Father, welcome to my home, though I guess this isn't just a friendly visit." Father Miguel shook his hand briefly, grip firm but cold. "No, I'm here to bring Elena back to a proper life, away from whatever this is." "This is a family reunion," Elena said firmly. "Magnus is my brother." The priest's eyebrows shot up. "Your brother?" "Elena, you have no family. I raised you from age 3. Your parents and family died in the 1840 fever." "That's what we were told," Magnus said carefully. "But we found proof it's not true." Elena brought the faded photo and their dad's discharge papers. Father Miguel studied them closely, his face growing troubled. "Where'd you get these?" he asked. "Sister Catherine gave them to me," Elena said. "They were with me when I came to the convent as a kid." Father Miguel looked at the photo intensely. "The resemblance is strong to both of you. But photos can be faked, documents forged. Why would anyone fake this?" Magnus asked. "What's the point?" The priest had no answer, and Magnus pushed. "Father, if Elena found family, shouldn't that be a reason to celebrate, not suspect?" "It should," Father Miguel said slowly, "if it's as innocent as you say." His eyes flicked between them, noticing how they stood closer than most siblings, their careful avoidance of touch showing restraint, not ease. "Our relationship's complicated," Elena said honestly. "We were split as kids and just found each other. We're learning to be family after 35 years. "Learning to be family," Father Miguel repeated, "and living alone together here with no chaperone." "Elena's a grown woman," Magnus said, patience thinning. "She doesn't need permission to live how she wants." "But she does," the priest said. "The church raised her. Without family, I'm her guardian for moral matters. I have a duty to protect her virtue and soul." The words were a challenge, and Magnus felt anger rising, but Elena stepped in. "Father, there's something else I learned here." She went inside and returned with a new paper, official with ribbons and seals. Father Miguel read it, his face paling. "Where'd you get this?" he whispered. "I found it in Sister Catherine's things after she died last winter," Elena said. "The new Mother Superior gave it to me when I left to find family." Magnus tried to read the Latin text over Father Miguel's shoulder. "What is it?" "An adoption certificate," Father Miguel said slowly. "Dated June 15th, 1843. It says Elena Maria Santos was adopted by the church after being orphaned in a fever outbreak." Magnus felt the ground shift. "Adopted? So she's not my blood sister?" "Her birth parents died in the same epidemic, but they weren't your family," Father Miguel said. The silence was heavy, broken only by wind in the pines and cattle lowing. Magnus stared at Elena, seeing her as the woman from Devil's Creek, not his sister. "That's impossible," Elena whispered. "The photo, the resemblance." "The photo shows your adoptive siblings," Father Miguel explained. "The church placed orphans with families who lost kids. This family took you in after losing their daughter." Magnus's world flipped. "So the man and woman in the photo aren't your parents?" "Your parents were David and Catherine Blackwood," Father Miguel said. "Elena's were Miguel and Rosa Santos, my cousins, which is why I cared so much about her." Elena sank onto the porch steps, stunned. "So we're not related. Just two orphans from the same tragedy who found each other 35 years later." "It seems so," Father Miguel said gently. "Elena, I didn't know you were told you had a brother." "Church records said your family was gone." Magnus sat beside her, mind racing. "So all the guilt, the boundaries we kept were for nothing." "We've been torturing ourselves over feelings that were okay," Elena said, voice empty. Father Miguel saw their careful distance. "You felt something for each other and thought it was wrong because you believed you were siblings." "We lived as family," Magnus said, "sharing a home, caring for each other, but keeping strict rules because we thought it was incest. My children, the pain you've gone through." Father Miguel said. Elena looked at Magnus, her eyes free of guilt. We're not related. We're just two people who fell in love. It seems so, Magnus said, still reeling. Father Miguel cleared his throat. This clears the blood issue, but not propriety. Elena, you've been living alone with a man you're not married to. That's a problem for the church and society. Magnus's protective side flared. Father, Elena's free to choose her life. She doesn't need permission. Peace, Father Miguel said, raising a hand. I'm not here to judge, just to protect Elena's reputation and soul. Now that we know you're not related, we need to address other things. Elena stood, strong as ever. Father, I found a home and purpose here, someone who loves me for me. I won't give that up for social rules. Nor should you, Father Miguel said, surprising them. But there's a way to keep what you have and meet propriety. Magnus raised an eyebrow. What? The priest smiled warmly. Marriage. You love each other, you're not related, you're free to marry. What's stopping you? The problem, Elena said quietly, is we spent months thinking our feelings were wrong, settling for family instead of love. We never thought marriage was possible. Magnus looked at Elena, seeing her as the woman who changed his life, not a forbidden sister. Elena, would you marry me? Elena pressed her hand to her throat, overwhelmed. I don't know. Everything I thought about us changed in an hour. Father Miguel sat on the railing, giving them time. This isn't a quick choice, though your hearts probably chose months ago. Magnus stood close to Elena. Look at me. What do you see now? I see the man I loved at Devil's Creek, she said slowly. The one I wanted to say yes to when he asked me to share his life. The one I tried not to love because I thought it was wrong. Now I see my future if you'll have me. The man I want to wake up to every morning, sleep beside every night, the father of my kids, my partner in everything. Magnus felt a door open in his chest, letting in light and hope. Yes, he said, voice rough. I'll have you as my wife, my partner, the love I never thought I could have. Father Miguel coughed. Maybe ask her properly with respect. Magnus laughed, a free sound, and knelt on the porch, taking Elena's hands. Elena Maria Santos, will you marry me? Share my name, my life in this tough, beautiful land? Yes, Elena said, tears falling. Yes, Magnus Blackwood, with all my heart. Father Miguel beamed as Magnus swept Elena into his arms, spinning her in joy. When? Elena asked, breathless. When can we marry? Right now, if you want, Father Miguel said. I can do the ceremony here, with the mountains as your church and nature as your witness. Magnus and Elena looked at each other, knowing they'd waited long enough. Now, Elena said firmly, I want to marry you before anything else stops us. Sure? Magnus asked, though his excitement showed. We could plan something proper. Magnus, Elena said, I've waited my whole life to belong to someone. I'm not waiting another day. Father Miguel got his prayer book. Let me grab my things, and we'll make this official before God and Wyoming. As he went to his horse, Magnus and Elena stood in the sunlight, hands clasped, hearts free. Ready for this? Magnus asked. For marriage? For being my partner? I've been ready since I met you, Elena said. I just didn't know I could want it. The green ribbon in her hair glowed, and Magnus touched it. Where'd this come from? My birth mom, Rosa Santos, Elena said softly. Sister Catherine said it was the only thing with me at the convent. I kept it to remember where I came from. Magnus smiled, seeing why it stood out at Devil's Creek. You'll wear it at our wedding as a sign of our journey. Father Miguel returned with his prayer book and a cross, setting them on the railing. Sure you want this? Marriage is serious, not to be taken lightly. Sure, they said together, voices strong. As Father Miguel began the ceremony, the sun lit the clearing where two orphans from the same tragedy were free to love. The green ribbon fluttered, a symbol of hope and new starts. As Elena Maria Santos became Elena Maria Blackwood, the simple ceremony in the mountain light should have ended their troubles. But Magnus knew Wyoming wouldn't let things be that easy. Even as they said their vows, his instincts, sharp from years in the wild, sensed trouble coming. Father Miguel stayed 3 days after the wedding, supposedly to check on the new couple, but Magnus thought it was to make sure the marriage was real, not a trick to quiet gossip. The priest seemed happy with what he saw, the easy way Magnus and Elena moved together, their clear love now free to grow. You found something special, Father Miguel told Magnus on his last morning, watching Elena in her garden. A love that gets stronger through tough times and makes two lonely people better together. I know how lucky I am, Magnus said, though his voice hinted at worry. Father Miguel studied him. But something's bothering you. What is it? Magnus paused, deciding how much to share. Father, when life gives you something too good, it usually comes with a cost. Elena and I are happy, but not everyone will get or accept us. You mean the months you lived together thinking you were siblings? Partly, Magnus said, but also my reputation here. I'm not exactly a respectable guy by most standards. Elena deserves better than being tied to a man known for fighting more than goodness. Father Miguel put a hand on Magnus's shoulder. Respect comes from what you do, not what people say. I've seen how you treat Elena. Caring, protecting, loving. That's what makes a good man. Tell that to Marshal Hendricks when he comes asking questions, Magnus said darkly. Or the townsfolk in South Pass City when they start whispering about me and my suspicious marriage to a younger woman. Father Miguel's face grew serious. About Marshal Hendricks, there's something you should know. The complaints about you and Elena didn't come from just anyone. They came from Joshua Blackwood, your uncle. Magnus felt cold anger. Joshua's still alive? Very much, Father Miguel said. And he's been keeping tabs on you, waiting for a chance to stir trouble. When he heard you took a young woman to your mountain, he saw a way to ruin your name and maybe drive you out. Elena joined them, sensing the tension. What's wrong? You look like you saw something awful. Magnus explained Father Miguel's news, watching Elena's face shift from confusion to fury matching his. He split us as kids, stole our inheritance, and now he's trying to wreck our marriage, she said quietly. How much hurt can one man cause a family? As much as good people let him, Magnus said grimly. Father Miguel looked worried. What are you thinking? Please don't do anything reckless. I'm thinking of protecting my wife, Magnus said. And settling a 35-year-old debt? No, Magnus, Elena said firmly. We won't fix this with fighting. That's what Joshua wants, to push you into something that proves his lies to the law. But then they saw dust rising from the valley trail. 4 horses coming fast, like men on a mission. Marshal Hendricks, Father Miguel said darkly. He's here to check the complaints. Magnus grabbed his rifle. Redemption, a beautiful deadly gun he'd customized over years. What's your plan? Elena asked, seeing his hard expression. I'm planning to be ready for whatever they're here to do, Magnus said, checking the rifle. Out here, Elena, law and justice aren't always the same. Sometimes you have to defend what's yours. Father Miguel stepped up. Let me talk to them first. As Elena's guardian and the priest who married you, I can speak to their concerns. With respect, Father, you don't know Marshal Hendricks, Magnus said. He's honest but sees things simply, legal or illegal, proper or not. Our messy situation won't impress him. Elena stood by Magnus, her eyes strong. Then we faced them as husband and wife, with nothing to hide or apologize for. The riders reached the clearing, Marshal Hendricks leading with 2 deputies and a 4th man Magnus recognized with bitter anger. Joshua Blackwood, older now, gray and lined, but with the same sneaky, mean eyes from childhood. The marshal dismounted, hand on his gun, taking in the neat cabin, Elena's garden, and signs of a shared home. He paused at Father Miguel, surprised to see a priest. Marshal Hendricks, Magnus said formally, staying on the porch. You're far from South Pass City. Mr. Blackwood? The marshal replied. I'm here to look into reports of improper conduct with you and a woman named Elena Santos. Elena Blackwood now, Father Miguel cut in. I married them 3 days ago with the church's authority. The marshal's eyebrows went up. Married? The complaint said you'd been living in sin for months. Those complaints, Magnus said, glaring at Joshua, came from a man with a grudge who's been making my life hard forever. Joshua spoke, his voice whiny like Magnus remembered. Magnus, boy, I'm just worried about you living like a hermit taking advantage of a girl who doesn't know better. Enough, Elena said sharply, standing by Magnus. Mr. Blackwood, the older one, you lost any right to care about Magnus when you split us as kids and lied that we were dead. The marshal's eyes sharpened. What's this about being split as kids? Father Miguel showed the adoption certificate and photo, explaining their tangled history. The marshal studied them, looking troubled. So you thought you were siblings, lived together believing it, and just found out you're not? Yes, Elena said. We kept strict rules because we thought we were related. Joshua's face darkened. That's a handy story, but who says it's true? Maybe they're just saying they're siblings to cover up months of bad behavior. I say it's true, Father Miguel said firmly. So do church records and territorial papers showing Magnus's family history. The marshal looked at them, grappling with a situation messier than he expected. Mr. Blackwood, Magnus, are you saying your uncle lied about your sister's death to steal your inheritance? Exactly, Magnus said. And I have proof. He got their dad's discharge papers and land grant, watching Joshua pale as the marshal read them. These are big claims, the marshal said. If true, they point to crimes over decades. Not claims, Magnus said coldly. Facts. Joshua knows it. Joshua squirmed in his saddle. There might have been some mix-up, but I was doing what was best for everyone. Best for who? Elena demanded. Not us. You left 2 kids thinking they were alone so you could steal our parents' land. The marshal's face grew grim. Mr. Joshua Blackwood, we need to talk about fraud, theft, and false complaints. You can't prove anything, Joshua said, but his voice wavered. Magnus stepped off the porch, rifle in hand, deputies tensing. But he made no threats, just stood where he could watch everyone and protect Elena and Father Miguel. I don't need to prove it, Magnus said. The papers do. The air was tense, and Elena saw they were close to a moment that could turn violent if not handled carefully. Magnus's reputation for quick action was real, and Joshua's presence stirred old anger. Magnus, she said softly, touching his arm, let the law handle this. We have what we want. Each other, the truth, our marriage. Don't let him ruin it. But Magnus's eyes caught movement in the trees beyond the clearing, signs of more men coming. His war and frontier skills screamed ambush. Marshal, he said urgently, you're not alone up here. Armed men are moving in those trees. Hendricks turned, following Magnus's gaze. My deputies? No, sir, a deputy said. We're all here. Joshua's face shifted to smug, and Magnus realized his uncle had planned for more than complaints, a deadly trap. Elena, Magnus said quietly, get inside now. But before she could move, gunfire exploded from the trees, turning the confrontation into a fight for survival that would test everything Magnus knew about protecting those he loved. The first shot broke the quiet, splintering the porch railing near Elena. Magnus reacted fast, tackling her behind the woodpile as bullets flew. Stay down, he shouted, shielding her. Don't move till I say. Marshal Hendricks and his deputies took cover behind their horses, firing back at the muzzle flashes. Father Miguel pressed against the cabin wall, pale but steady. Only Joshua stayed on his horse, smirking as his hired gunmen attacked. Magnus raised redemption and picked off targets, one behind a log, another behind a rock. He counted 6 or 7 men, surrounding them on 3 sides, the cabin blocking the 4th. Who are they? Hendricks called, reloading. Ask my uncle, Magnus said grimly. He'll know. Joshua was riding toward the trees, dodging bullets. A deputy tried to stop him, but a shot from the forest forced him back. Elena clung to Magnus's back, feeling his tension as he aimed. Magnus, there's too many. We need the cabin. Not yet, he said, eyes on the forest. Inside, we're trapped. Out here, I can move. Use the land. He fired 3 quick shots, each hitting a mark. The return fire slowed, but they weren't safe. Father Miguel called, movement to the east, more men on the trail. Magnus cursed. Joshua had planned this, using the marshal's visit as cover for a killing. Marshal! Magnus shouted. Fall back to the cabin. We can hold them there. But as they retreated, more gunfire came from the east, hitting a deputy in the open. He fell, clutching his shoulder. Magnus sprinted through bullets, grabbed the deputy, and hauled him to the cabin. The door! He yelled to Father Miguel, who opened it just in time. They tumbled inside, Elena helping the hurt deputy. Hendricks and the other deputy followed, slamming the door as bullets hit it. Inside was dim, but Elena saw blood on the deputy's shirt. How bad? Magnus asked, checking his rifle. Through the shoulder, Elena said, using her skirt as bandages. He'll live if we stop the bleeding and infection. The gunfire outside stopped, replaced by a creepy quiet. Magnus peered through a window shutter. They're moving, planning a big attack. Hendricks joined him, grim. Mr. Blackwood, I owe you an apology. Your uncle set this up to kill you and your wife. Apologies don't stop bullets, Magnus said. The question is how we survive to make Joshua pay. Elena finished bandaging and stood by Magnus. How many are left? Hard to say. I got 3 or 4, but more came from the east. Joshua's had years to plan. Father Miguel studied the cabin. Solid logs, small windows, good shooting spots. If we're fighting, this is a good place. The problem's time, Magnus said. They can wait us out, cut off water, try to burn us. They'll find a way. Elena touched his arm. What about your reputation? Don't you have friends who could help? Magnus shook his head. Anyone who'd help is too far. Pete's weeks away, and Sarah's too far to hear shots. Joshua's voice came through a speaking horn. Magnus, you've been trouble for years, boy. Come out with the woman, and I'll make it quick. Magnus moved to the door but didn't open it. Why trust you, Joshua? You've lied since I was 10. Because you're out of options, Joshua said. I've got enough men to keep you pinned forever. You'll run out of bullets, water, or food. Elena stood by Magnus, firm. He's not taking me anywhere. We face this together. Magnus looked at his wife, feeling fierce protection. Elena, if this goes bad, don't, she cut in. Don't talk like we've lost. You're Magnus Blackwood. You've survived everything for 43 years. You're not quitting now. Marshal Hendricks spoke. What are our options? You know this land best. Magnus thought fast. There's a root cellar under the cabin with a tunnel to the creek, 50 yards north. If we make a distraction, someone small could slip out. Elena got it. You want me to escape while you hold them? I want you to live, Magnus said bluntly. To have the life you deserve. But Elena's face was stubborn. We've been married 3 days. If you think I'll run and leave you, you don't know your wife. Men moved outside, branches snapping, gear rattling for a final attack. Magnus checked redemption, ready to fight. Elena grabbed a wooden box from her things, pulling out a pearl-handled Derringer pistol. Sister Catherine gave me this, she said, checking it like a pro. Said a woman alone out here needs to be ready. Magnus stared, impressed. Can you use it? Elena's smile was cold. Father, pray for our enemies. They don't know what they're up against. Joshua was about to learn that attacking Magnus and Elena at home was a big mistake. The final attack came at sunset with gunmen hitting from 3 sides. Magnus took the main window, Hendricks the east, and Elena the west with her Derringer. Father Miguel stayed with the wounded deputy, loading weapons. 4 men rushed from the trees. Magnus dropped 2 with redemption. Hendricks got a 3rd, but the 4th reached the cabin trying to burn it with a torch. East wall! Elena called. He's setting a fire. Magnus couldn't move. More men were coming, so Elena acted. She slipped through the west window, dropped to the ground, and shot the man with the torch twice, fast and clean. She threw the torch into the creek and climbed back inside as Magnus turned. Elena, what the heck? He was gonna burn us, she said, reloading. I stopped him. Magnus stared, amazed and scared. The gentlewoman from Devil's Creek had just killed with veteran skill. Joshua's voice rang out furious. You're just delaying, Magnus. Surrender, and I'll spare her. Your word's worthless, Magnus yelled, firing into the trees. But they were low.